Hi, and welcome back to the Mob Mentality Show. I am Chris Lucian, and Austin Chadwick is here with me as the co-host. Today, we're going to be talking about a new mob role that was recently merged into the mob programming RPG as a pull request. So that role is called Major Pain. And then we have another role following that we'll talk about called Dr. Feelgood, and they kind of go hand in hand. So Austin, as a contributor to this pull request, maybe you can go ahead and describe to us what that is, and then we can talk about it.
Yeah, so I think we'll start with Major Pain, and yes, it is a reference to the movie, as where it was inspired by. But I was in a mob of 3. And I was inspired to put in this pull request to the mob programming RPG because this person, definitely spoke up a lot about the pain that he was feeling from what was going on. And so as it's described in the game, verbalize to the mob pain felt in the process, tools, interpersonal interactions. Notice pain being felt by others and ask about it and show empathy. So there's kind of like, I'm feeling pain, or it looks like you're feeling pain. Maybe amplify pain that's being ignored, like, we keep doing the manual task over and over again, but we're okay with it. We're fine. We're happy with this. And it might even be pulling the end on cord and saying like, hey, we need to stop the line and talk about this thing. And I was inspired to write it because someone, it was a mob of 3. We got along really well. So the psychological safety was really high. And so, we'd just be, he'd be complaining about this or that or saying what was wrong. And a negative way to interpret it would be like, oh, why are you complaining so much? But we like leaned into it and said like, okay, well, why are you feeling this pain and what can we do about it? And it led to so many great improvements in regards to the tech we were using, the feedback loops. And so I think this is a good one for me to highlight because I'm kind of a, what's it called? Rosy colored sunglasses person. And so there could be pain felt and I'm just kind of like, oh, it's fine. Let's just keep going. Everything's good. Turn up the good. It's all good. Where sometimes paying attention to pain can really help things improve. Any major pains come to mind for you, Chris? And not the person,
but I think you make a really good point. It's that it's kind of like that nagging chronic pain that is the worst, right? And and it's really funny because typically those are compounded on top of each other. And so you bring up a really good point about automation in general, this idea that like, it's like, oh, it's okay to just do this small task over and over again. And especially when you're working solo, like there's no one else to kind of tell you, hey, like this is just something that you don't need to do anymore. The best example I think I can come up with that I think everybody's experienced is like going through and manually formatting your code, like putting tabs and spaces into the code over and over again, right? So like if you're in a mob and you're doing that, like almost everyone right away who is not driving is like, hit the shortcut, right? Because they're like outside of it and thinking about it and being like, don't spend all the time doing that. And so I think that's a really good example, a really small and concise example of what can happen in all sorts of systems. And so writing boilerplate code, especially around unit tests, it's like make a little generator for that or templating system of some kind and other things. So for me, the automationist is very much grounded in major pain. But I also, I've seen this a lot where it's like just keyboard shortcuts. It's a supporting role that maybe everybody has their thinking cap on around the major pain role in order to make sure that all these little these small or large pains end up working their way out of the system. Because if you just are content to ignore it, then you kind of get into that state of complacency and then you kind of plateau a little bit as well.
Yeah, for sure. And it could be small things like shortcuts, but it can try to be big things. Like you mentioned, automation can be a big one. I saw one where there's a particular tech stack that people would run away from with speed. And so by showing empathy for the pain and really talking about it and really trying to come up with a plan to be like, okay, how can we apply a strangler here? Can we write new code in a better tech stack that gives us better feedback loops that the rest of the people don't run away from. And so it can really help with small problems, but also can help with big systemic problems like, oh, why does no one stay on this particular team for longer than a month? And so, and so I think reaching out, if maybe the call to action is if you're in a mob and you're feeling pain, communicate it, share it, and then ask for feedback, what to do about it. If you see other people grimacing or being frustrated, and to lean into that and show some empathy and ask questions and see where it leads. So this might be a good time to transition to Dr. Feelgood.
All right.
This is kind of the other. What's that? Yeah.
Lay it on us.
Lay it on us. Yeah. So I think major pain probably inspired Dr. Feelgood. It's kind of like, well, obviously mob programming and turn up the good. I mean, that's a big part of mobbing in general. And so it's kind of the other side of the coin that maybe should be emphasized the most. And that so to show appreciation to another mobber or a stakeholder, even using the SBI model. So I think SBI is really important because you say the situation, the behavior they're doing, and the impact it's having. And I say that out loud because it's a good reminder for myself, because often I'll just be like, hey, that was great, thanks, which is still fine, but it's not as impactful as if you say like, hey, when we were struggling in the code and you found that item on Stack Overflow and shared it with us, that really moved us along. So thank you so much, And so, so showing appreciation, just verbalizing something that gives you joy about what we're doing. You're like, oh man, the TDD loop we're in right now is really, really tight and the feedback's really fast. I'm just loving this. I'm really happy right now. So thank you, everybody. And then kind of reaching out to others, noticing happiness expressed by others and asking about it. And then this can all turn into retrospective topics of like the classic turn up the good. Yep. So like, hey, this TDD loop's really good. How can we turn that up, to be in other tech stacks or other repos we're using and things like that. Any feel good stories come to mind for you, Chris?
Yeah, well, I think that you can take either viewpoint from Major Pain or Dr. Feelgood, right? And you can essentially, if you're in that turn up the good mindset, then maybe you notice a pain, but maybe you don't approach it from like, oh, this is painful and like just complaining about it, right? But you can notice those moments where it doesn't feel bad, and then talk about turning up the good there, right? So it's like, maybe going back to that example, we might say something like, this repetitive thing, like formatting the code is really painful, but you could also, conversely, if you have the opportunity, you could say, when they use the auto format, you can say like, oh, that auto format was really good, and that felt a lot better than what we were experiencing before. Especially if like they found it on their own, right? Just like reinforcing that positive behavior. But and I think that just turning up the good during retrospectives, I think this is really like how mobbing like ended up lasting a longer time, was we were retrospecting on it. We're just saying, hey, notice that thing that we always had to deal with before is now gone. Like, oh, we don't really have any merge conflicts anymore. That's really interesting. Like maybe we should mob more. Oh, we're not really having to work on pull requests, or we're not creating as many bugs, and that feels good to be doing those things. And so I think that in this role, it was really obvious over time that when we were first mobbing, that it's just something that we should keep doing. But if no one was noticing that these differences were happening, if no one was kind of like sponsoring it a little bit, then it would have been very easy to just say, okay, well, this might this takes a lot of people and a lot of time, and maybe it's not as valuable. But when you notice all those like small little payoffs that make you feel better about the work you're doing, it becomes really evident that there's a lot of value in the practice, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think the more, it's kind of one of those things, the more you do it, the more it grows and spreads, right? And I don't know if you've ever been in mobs where the energy doesn't feel as exciting, or people feel low or whatever. And so I feel like And then I've been in mobs where people share their joy. They're like, oh, this was really exciting what happened here. And then it tends to spread to other people. And yeah, and I've even some people start their day mobbing with like a phrase or something like that, like woohoo. But then I see other people start doing that more often, right? And so it can spread around, and it can also spread around in a tech way too. I remember one person joined our mob who was like, oh my gosh, you guys are manually deploying this app, so these are all the really good things I experienced on some other mob. Can we work on that? And be like, oh sure, let's do that. And so yeah, it can be pretty much anything. And I think, like we've said before, if you just turning it up 1% every day, that really grows to be a lot over time. And
plus 1% infinity.
Plus, yeah, there you go. That's what that phrase is right there. So right on. Well, I'm excited that these roles are now officially part of the game. And maybe the next step will be make PDFs and make all the graphic art and all that kind of stuff. But for now, it's at least in there. And yeah, so if you see any ways to turn up the good or accentuate some pain to help your mob out, go for it.
Yep.
And please like and subscribe. We love your feedback. Love seeing your comments on YouTube, Twitter, and more. And until next time, mob well and have a good one.
Bye, everybody.